Hello, class. I wanted to start off by introducing myself. My name is Lydia Reyes, and today I'm going to be talking about remembering Chicano movements today. I wanted to start off with a quote by Cesar Chavez, which stated, "We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others for the sakes and for our own." That hit home. What is a Chicano? A Chicano is an individual who is native of or descends from Mexico and who lives in the United States. Chicano or Chicana became widely known during the Chicano movement during the 1960s by many Mexican Americans to a political stance on pride in a shared cultural, ethnic, and community identity by Mexican Americans to donate the identity that is in opposition to Anglo-American culture while being neither fully American or Mexican. Chicano embodies in between nature of cultural cross between separate races and cultures. Cesar Chavez contributions to the Chicano movement. Cesar Estrada Chavez was born in Yuma, Arizona on March 31st, 1927. In the late 1930s, after losing their homestead to foreclosure, he and his family joined more than 300,000 people who moved to California during the Great Depression and became migrant farm workers. Chavez dropped out of school after 8th grade and began working in fields full-time. In 1946, he joined the U.S. Navy, serving for 2 years in a segregated unit. After his service was over, he returned to farm work and married. In 1942, Chavez was working at a lumber yard in San Jose when he became a grassroots organizer for the Community Service Organization CSO, a Latino civil rights group. Over the next decade, he worked to register new voters and fight racial and economic discrimination, and rose to become the CSO's national director. Chavez resigned from the CSO in 1962 after other members refused to support his efforts to form labor union for farm workers. That same year, he used his life savings to found the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA, in Delano, California. Chavez knew firsthand the struggles of the nation's poorest and most powerless workers who labored to put food on the nation's tables while often going hungry themselves, not covered by minimum wage laws. Many made as little as 40 cents an hour and did not qualify for unemployment insurance. Previous attempts to unionize farm workers had failed, as California's powerful agriculture industry fought back with the weight of their money and political power. Chavez was inspired by the nonviolent civil disobedience pioneered by Gandhi in India and the example of Saint Francis of Assisi in the 13th century Italian nobleman who gave his material wealth to live with and work on behalf of the poor. Working doggedly to build the NFWA alongside fellow organizer Dolores Huerta, Chavez traveled around the San Joaquin and Imperial Valleys to recruit the union members. Meanwhile, Helen Chavez worked in fields to support the family as they struggled to stay afloat. Here's another quote by Cesar Chavez, which stated, "You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore." I wanted to go more in depth of what Cesar Chavez did to contribute towards the Chicano movement. September 1965, the NFWA launched a strike against California's grape growers alongside the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, AWOC, a Filipino American labor group. The strike lasted 5 years and expanded into a nationwide boycott of California grapes. The boycott drew widespread support. thanks to a highly visible campaign headed by Chavez, who led a 340-mile march from Delano, Sacramento in 1966, also known as the 350-mile pilgrimage, to dramatize La Cause, which undertook a well-publicized 25-day hunger strike in 1968. Throughout the 1970s, Chavez continued leading the union's efforts to win labor contracts for farm workers across the agriculture industry, employing the same nonviolent techniques of strikes and boycotts. In 1972, he went on a second hunger strike to protest an Arizona law banning farm workers from organizing and protesting. Thanks to the UFW's efforts, California passed the landmark Agricultural Labor Relations Act in 1975, giving all farm workers the right to unionize and negotiate for better wages and working conditions. By mid-1980s, Chavez focused the dangers of pesticides for farm workers and their children in 1988. At the age 61, he underwent his third hunger strike, which lasted for 36 days. I wanted to talk about how La Adelita contributed towards the Chicano movement. La Adelita symbolized a lot of things when it came to the Mexican Revolution, in which I'm going to go more in depth about. La Adelita is one of the most famous corridos of the Mexican Revolution. As the years have passed, it has made many adaptations. La Adelita, this particular version, it was inspired by Durangan women who joined Madrista movement in the early stages of the revolution and fell in love with Madero. She became a popular icon, and the source documented the role of women in the Mexican Revolution. She gradually became synonymous with their soldadera, female soldiers who became a vital source in the Revolutionary War efforts due to their participation in the battles against the Mexican government forces. Today, La Adelita shows importance not only to the Chicana movement, but shows power for women's rights with the great actions she took, as she is now symbolized as a warrior in Mexico. La Adelita may also be defined as a woman who struggles yet fights for her rights. It is argued that La Adelita expressed the sensitivity and vulnerability of army men, emphasizing the stoicism of rebellious male soldier as he confronted the prospect of death. Adelitas show bravery and revolutionary spirit, which are lost to the fatalism and insecurities of male soldiers who focus on passion, love, desire as they face combat. The next event I want to talk about is the Lemon Grove incident, which plays a big role when it comes to Chicano movements. The Lemon Grove incident contributed as a Chicano movement as it occurred in San Diego County during the 1930s. In a rural community of Lemon Grove, the racial segregation of Latinos in the public school system is discussed in the film Lemon Grove Incident, where it examines the 1930s trial of Roberto Alvarez versus the Board of Trustees of the Lemon Grove School District that ended school segregation of Mexican children in the District of Lemon Grove, California. The trial segregation of Mexican children in the public school system. Although the case allowed for Mexican integration, it only applied to the small district of Lemon Grove, causing little impact on the rest of the state. Furthermore, Mexican children continued to face segregation in public schools until Brown versus Board of Education 1954, which called for the desegregation of all schools. The case of Alvarez versus the Board of Trustees of Lemon Grove School District was the first successful school desegregation court decision in history of the United States. It is important in San Diego and U.S. history, not solely because it occurred, but because the community took court action and won the case. They established the rights of their children to equal education despite local, regional, and national sentiment that favored not only segregation, but the actual deportation of Mexican population in the United States. The case is a testimony of the San Diego Mexican community rights and their actions towards equality in education not only for their own children, but for the Mexican population in California and the United States. I wanted to thank you all, class and professor, for taking the time to view my presentation, and just to think of how much I've learned this semester when it comes to Chicano studies is crazy. I never even thought that we face so much equality in history. And now that I know that, I look at life a lot differently. And I can't believe how much Chicanos have been through and how these movements have impacted all of us through generations. And I hope we can continue doing that today. I wanted to end by reading just a quote by Cesar Chavez, which said, "We must understand the highest form of freedom carries with it the greatest measure of discipline." Thank you, class, and remember, si se puede.